Thank you everybody for joining us today for our Criterion learning series. Today we're going to be talking about forms in the system, how to use them, how to set them up. As a reminder, we do have a chat feature and a Q&A. So if you have any questions, we do have people monitoring the Q&A. Please feel free to post your messages in the Q&A or your questions there, and we'll try to answer them. If we are not able to get to them in the 30 minutes that we have today, we will follow up via email so that you can get those questions answered. So let's go ahead and get started here. Let me go ahead and switch my screen over to my browser. All right, so here's an example of a form, an I-9 form. If you're familiar with this from the United States, the I-9 form, you can see what a form could look like in the system. And this one, I've already completed it as far as the information on it. You may have seen these I-9s when we first started doing the E-Verify last year or 2 years ago, maybe it was, when we started doing it. So this is an example of one. I just wanted to show that on the screen so you can kind of see what they look like. When you assign a form to an employee, of course, they'll get a notification and they're going to see it possibly under forms, but also it could be under employee onboarding, depending on how it's assigned to them. So that's where the employees will see it in the system. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to set one up. I set up a couple different types of forms, and then we'll assign one and we'll fill that out for Ted here. So let's go over to the admin side. And I've already gone here under general. So in my settings here, under general, you'll see forms. As a reminder, you can always search by just typing in forms, and it's going to be one of two things. You'll see formats, of course, because it has the same letters, but there's forms right here. Now I have a number of them already set up. You may not have any. You may have just a couple system forms when you come in here. Those will always be here. They're ones that come with the systems that are used for settings on different forms and stuff. So they may already be here for you. You may have forms that you're currently using. And of course, if you have some that you're no longer using, when you hit show inactive, if you did have any inactive, they would look something like that, where you can, they would be hidden. So now you'll notice that one is gone. So let's talk about, first off, importing in a PDF that you might want to load into the system. So if you already have an existing form that you've created or you've been using for a long time, you can import them into the system using this button in the top right that says import. So I'll go ahead and do that right here. I have a handbook acknowledgement form that I have created. And so when I do import, you'll see it says successfully imported there. And here is my new form. Now, the name of it here is just going to be the name of the file, .pdf, and we add these numbers at the end here. I really should ask our team what those numbers mean, but we'll add those numbers. We're going to strip those off here in a second. Now, before we can really do a lot of work in here, there are some things that we might need to do. You'll see here type. This will determine where or what kind of form it is. Now, there's probably already a bunch of form types already set up in your system, but this is under your code tables. So if you're doing something, let's say an acknowledgement, you want to put down that's the type of that, you would want to set those up first, just to show you where that is. Under system configuration, you'll see code tables, and you can set them up there first. I've covered code tables before, but this is where you would go to do that, and that's where the type comes from. Also, the workflow. The workflow is not required, so I'm not going to cover that right now, but that's the default workflow for this form. So if you allow your employees to launch this from self-service, it would be the workflow that's going to be used for that. So that's what workflows is all about right here. The types, let me just switch over to that one just so you can see where they are. I'm not going to go and set one up, but you'll see different document types right here. And so you could configure different ones. Like I said, there's going to be a bunch of them here that are already configured, and it's possible you've already done your own, but this is where you would configure those types. That's what these are right here. So I'm just going to pick one. It doesn't really matter what I'm going to do here in my situation. In fact, I'm just going to do this one just called none specified. The workflow, if I want to assign one, I can. So let me go ahead and just do the one there called forms, but I don't need to. You'll notice it's not required. The only thing that is required is the name, the type, and the size. All right. If you would like to have a description here, you could choose the different languages if you want to. I'm going to strip the PDF and numbers off the end there, and I'm going to use the same name as the description here. So I'll just copy and paste this. All right, of course, I could use the keyboard shortcuts there. Now, when I'm using the form, if I want people to be able to use it, of course, it needs to be active. So you'll notice by default, this is active. Share with employee. What this means is when you assign this to the employee or the employee assigns it to themselves in self-service, do they get to see a copy of it when it's done? Or is it only going to be visible in the administrative section? So you may want to allow the employees to see that. By default, what we do is we do lock the forms after it's approved, so nobody can go back and change the form. However, there might be times where you do need to have a form they can go back and do it. Maybe it's some type of equipment form and you need to go back in and put in a serial number after it's approved or something like that. So you may want to allow it to be edited after approval. In that situation, you would check this. So it automatically is locked after approval. If you do not want it to be locked, you would check that. I'm going to leave that unchecked. Here's the size of the paper. So in my situation, it's letter, but you'll see A4 is also an option there. And then initiate by employee. This allows you to say this group of employees is able to assign this form to themselves. So this would show up in self-service under forms if they're a member of one or more of these groups. So you'll see here as an example, if I choose active employees and maybe, I don't know, salary or something like that, these groups of employees would be able to launch this form. Now I'm going to come back to this assign button because I want to show you the form and how you can edit and stuff like that. So remember I imported. So I have already the PDF in this particular format here. Here's my PDF. Don't worry about the wording here. It's just a makeup form here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a couple of fields to this because I want to have them on the form. All right. So on the right hand side here, you'll see various controls on a form. So we'll start off here. This will go back to the previous screen. That's what that is right there. You can also hit the back button down here. Here you can export what you've done. So maybe you're doing this in your sandbox and you want to export it to put in live. So this will generate an XML file that you can then import. Just like I imported the PDF, you can import the XML. So that way you can set it up in the sandbox, test it all out, make sure it works great, export it, and then import it into your live. This will add a page. As you can see, I'm on page 1 of 1, and perhaps I need a second page for something or more. I can add a page there. I can also remove, maybe when I imported, there was a blank page at the end or something, and I just want to remove it. This will remove that page. This and all the way down to the bottom here are adding different things to this particular form. So starting off with text, this is going to add a text box to the form. So you'll see here, this allows me to have the person who's filling out the form enter in some text. So I can place this wherever I want. You saw all I did is drag and drop it out here. And it added this control over here on the left is the properties of this text box. You'll see things like the font size, the maximum size in text, that's the number of characters. So I could type up to 25 characters. Here's the positioning on the field. Now I can click and drag it around, but I can also, if I want to be very precise with this, I could tell it how many pixels down and to the right if I want to do that. So 150 from the left, 150 pixels, 865 from the top. So there's my X and Y positions there. Here's the width. So if I want to make it larger, I could type in, 250 or something, and it would make it larger. You probably want to do that if you had a much bigger size than 25. You might want to make it much larger. There's the height. You'll see that there. Is this required? In other words, whoever's filling this out, they have to actually put something in this field here. You may want to make that required. Once you've set all of these things up here, you might want to lock the position so you don't accidentally drag it around. That can happen if you're trying to maybe click and move something, or maybe you click and inadvertently move it. You can lock it down, which means I can't click and change anything. Also, you'll see these fields are gray. Those are locked there. The code. Now, anytime you're making a form, each field has a code associated with it. We're making a field in our database. So this is the name of that field of what it's going to be. So if I'm going to say, take the person's first name, I might want to say first name as the code there. All right, the content token. So this is if you would like the system to pull the information from the employee's record, there's a number of tokens that we can add to have it pull stuff from their records. So let's say I wanted it to put the person's first name there. First name is the token. Now, if you're curious about all the tokens, right here in support, you'll see we have a number of them listed, and then I think we have a link off to all the lists of the fields here. Let me just see here. Here we go. So you can see there's validation, but there's also a list of the fields. Here we go. So you can see them right here. All right, now we will probably add some in the future to handle other things as we enhance the software. So this might change over time. And as we add it, of course, we update our documentation. But you can see there, I'm going to pull the first name for the employee right there in this situation. All right. The label, that is only for a form that you might be sending to a candidate. So if you're going to have them, you want to populate something, that's what a label is for. The target field, these are for candidates. So as they're filling out a form, it might be updating their record. You'll see different fields I can associate it with. So if this was, let's say, an application, I might want to save this information in a particular field here. Let's say, for an example, the address. I'm going to gather the address from their application. You'll see address 1, address 2, city, etc. are going to be in here. So different fields that it can go towards. And then the validation is if there's a certain format for this data, perhaps you're collecting social security numbers or phone numbers or something like that, and you want it to be in a certain layout, a certain data style, like social is 3, then dash, then 2, then dash, then 4, or the SIN, different formats. You may want to do that. Again, in our help here, we talk about that. You'll see if I go down right, where is that here? Somewhere we're talking about it. I just saw it a second ago. Let me find it. We talk about how to set that up right here. So you'll see here, you can look this up. Regex is the standard we're using there, and you can Google, different formats. So you can talk about that. So if you're interested in doing that, of course, our support's here to help you if you have questions on that. All right, now the last thing is who can edit it. So the submitter is going to be the person who's submitting the form for approval. That's the person who can edit it. You'll see also, you may want to allow the approver to edit a field. So maybe only the approver can edit it, or you can make it so nobody can edit it. It's just pulling information, but nobody can touch it. So as an example, maybe the first name, I just wanted to print the person's first name. So I'll just do that right there. Okay, let me add like the last name. I'm just going to add another field right here. Now here you'll see it when I try to drag it on, it doesn't line up. So this is where it might be helpful to click on a field and see, oh, okay, the position is 153,865. So if I make this 865, oops, it'll line up on there. So you'll see that right there. And then I maybe, make this a little bit wider. I think I had 250, so let me do 250 again. All right, and I'll say this is last name and last name. All right, and again, I'm not going to have anybody editing it, and I'm locking it. So this is an example of text. Now, number fields, you can imagine you might want to use numbers. Maybe you're going to put some type of pay change or something form. You want to collect some numbers. That's what this would be. This is an image. If you want an image to be on here, perhaps you want your logo or something else, you can drag this and then you can upload a logo. You'll see right here where I can do a file on that. If I want to remove a field, I just click on it and I hit delete on my keyboard there. A text block. So this allows you to, just like this has text, maybe I had a blank form, which is something we could do, and you wanted to type all this text yourself. That's what a text block is for. So I could go in here, double click, and I can type in my sample text. And of course, I can use these different controls up here for different fonts and colors and all the alignment and so forth. And now that's my text. Now, this is not where somebody's entering in text. This is me putting in maybe a description of this field. So maybe I want to put up here first name as an example right there. All right, you'll see here when I do a text block here, I don't have to give the field a name because I'm not collecting data. It's not going to save it in the database. All right, going down here, a date. So perhaps I want today's date on here. Do 865, and I'll put current date here. I'm not going to put a token there. It's a required field, so somebody has to put that date in there. And maybe I'll put a label on it that says, oops, let me put a label right here underneath it that says enter today's date. Okay, that's my label for that field there. Other things, a checkbox. Perhaps I want them to say they agree and they check a box. a radio, so they might be able to select from, let's say, 3 different options, and you put a little radio button, which allows you to have like 3 circles, and they select one of them. This is a memo field, which is a big field to type in data. So maybe you want them to type in an explanation of something, a note, something like that. That's a memo field. This right here is a drop down. So a drop down from one of our menus that's in the system. You could even make a custom drop down. So you'll see here different menus I could choose from. Maybe I want them to select their department. I'm not sure why, but let's say I want them to select their department. You might want to do that. Of course, I do need to give it a code because I'm collecting data. What am I saving in there? So that's an example there. Maybe you make a custom drop-down menu to, I don't know, choose their favorite color. So you make a custom drop-down menu, and then they have their favorite color on this form. All right, signature. So they're doing this acknowledgement here. I want them to actually sign it. That's what this little one is right here. This is going to be kind of a big box to sign. So I might want to make this pretty wide. Let's make it 600 so they have space to sign this. And I'm going to make this required. Now, you'll notice here, this, even though I'm having the person enter in data, we don't actually save this value in a database field that you can collect because it's an image. It's not, it's a signature. It's not like it's data, they're typing in their name or something. So this is like they're drawing the signature right there. All right, going down, you'll see I could collect an email address. I can put an attachment on here. Maybe I want them to upload something. So I want to have an attachment here where they're going to browse and attach a file or something. That's what that would be. And then here I can draw different shapes. Perhaps I want a line. So maybe I want a line right here that goes, across the page like that, a square, a circle. So those are the different things you can do right there. All right, so I've made my form and I'll go ahead and save that. So that's making a form by importing it. Now, we have 2 other options here. One is very similar, which is to make it, just click add there. And this is giving you a blank form. So I'll just show you very quickly here what a blank form looks like. And let's just call it a letter. And you'll see here it's just a blank form. So very similar to what I just saw, except for there's nothing on here. So I could have actually made that other one using a blank form, and in which case I might want to add a text block and type in all that text that I had there. Then I would add my fields to collect their name and their signature and so forth. But I'm not preloading a PDF or some other image in here. I'm going to be doing it all on my own. So that's what a blank form looks like. I'm just going to cancel that. And then the other thing you'll see here is I can do a data form. Now, a data form is not one where you're designing it and you're adding text and images and so forth. It's literally just a list of the fields that you're going to collect data. So here you'll see as an example, I'll do example data form. All right, I'm going to call this, I'll just keep it as non-specified there. And then here are the fields that I'm going to collect data. So I'm not getting that view where I'm dragging fields onto here. It's just going to be in the order that I add them here is what's going to show up on the form. So maybe I say, this is going to be a text field. And I'm going to say first name, and I'm going to call this first name. Do I want to put a format on it? I could do that. That's that same formatting that I did before. Is a required field, and I'll go ahead and save there. And then maybe I want to do a date field, and this is current date, and I put in today's date, and that would be a date field. All right, and I can add other types of fields just like you saw before where I can do that. Now, I don't have as many. For example, I don't have a signature field. I don't have attachment. Can't draw letters or squares or lines or circles. But I can do, the other fields that I'm doing on here. So it's designing kind of a simple form. You're not actually putting any text on it. You just maybe want to gather data for some reason. So you could do that for this. As you can see, though, you can do lots of other things on here. Drop down menus. Maybe I want to put the department, and I'm going to call this department, and I'm going to choose the drop down department somewhere on here. There we go. Okay, so that's that. You'll see over here on the right, I can move it up and down. So if I want to move department to the first thing, I can rearrange the columns there. If I would like to delete a column, maybe I don't need one of these, I can just go ahead and just hit the trash can there. If I no longer need to collect that data, maybe I've been using this form for a little while and I don't need it anymore, I can hide it. I can't remove it once the form has been used. So I would not be able to delete this if I've used this at least once and collected some data. Can't delete department because otherwise we'd lose all that data. But that's where the hidden would come into play. And you'll see right here, I can show the hidden fields if I had any. So let's say I didn't need the department anymore and I decided to hide it. Now I can see it and bring it back if I need to. All right, so that's a data form right there. Yeah, how do we actually assign these to the employees? Well, there's two different ways, of course. Well, actually three if you count onboarding, but I'm going to show directly from the form. So let's go to that handbook form. And you'll see a button right up here at the top right that allows me to assign it to somebody. So I can come out here. I can say, well, I want to use this workflow here. So again, these are where our workflows come into play. And I think we've talked about workflows in the past. So you'd have to create your workflow first. And then you decide who you're actually going to be doing the form, who's going to be doing the form here. So it might be a group of employees. So everybody who's considered active employees, as an example, or everybody who's in Pennsylvania or whatever, you can have a group there. Or maybe you want to just select the people who are doing that form. So maybe I'm going to have Chris and Ted fill out that form. And I could add as many people as I like here. Probably be faster to do a group if you're doing more than just a handful. But you get the idea. I can select a few people here. So there they are. Now, if I want somebody else to fill out the form on their behalf, maybe you've got a pay change form, all right? And you're going to do a pay change for Ted and Chris, but their supervisor is the one who's going to do it. You can assign somebody else to fill out that form. So I might come out here and say, Charlene is going to fill out the form for Chris and Ted. All right, here's the description of the form. So if you want to do that, you can put in a description. Well, it's a required field, so I'm going to call it handbook acknowledgement. Oops. All right, and then here's the due date. So I need them to complete it by the end of the week. Now, I want to share it with them when they're done, so I'm going to check that box off, and I'll go ahead and click Assign. This form was successfully assigned. So that's one way to do it. Now, when I come back over to self-service, just like I saw that I-9 form, I'm going to have a new form here that says handbook acknowledgement. And there's my form. So here, when I click on it, is the form that I was just working on. There you can see the first name, last name. These fields are red because I made them required. I have to put in today's dates and I need to sign the form. So there's Ted's signature. And at the bottom, I could save it, in which case, I'm just saving my copy because maybe I'm going to come back and do this, or I can cancel or submit. Now, cancel is going to clear everything out, of course. Submit is going to then use that workflow to determine where it goes. Perhaps it just goes and it's approved right away. Maybe it's got to go through one or more steps. That's depending on how you set up that workflow. All right, so I'll submit that. And now that one is done, it goes on to my next form. I had some other ones on there. Now, the other way to do this outside of an onboarding is you could allow your employees to assign it through forms right here. What they can see here is based off of that group on the form right here, initiate by employee. So he's a member of one of these groups, active employees and or salary, which is why he can do this right here. So these other ones are assigned to him in some way. He's a member of those groups. He can click this field right here and assign this to himself. Just call handbook, and I'll put today's date there. And now I'm going to have this as a form for me to fill out as Ted. And now here's that form again. Okay, I'll put today's date, and I don't remember what his signature is. All right, so that is signing or assigning it to myself. As I mentioned, I showed you assigning it right here. The other way is through onboarding. You might attach this form to an onboarding. So when you do onboarding, you might say, oh, I want them to read the handbooks. That's going to be a document perhaps you've published out there. And then you're going to have a handbook acknowledgement. So they'll acknowledge that they read the handbook, or they'll see the handbook, a link to it or something, and then they're going to sign this form. Now, where does it go? Let me see where that one goes. I think I use the forms workflow just so you can see kind of closing the loop here. I'm going to go to my track, and I'm going to actually prove this. So this one goes over to Chris. So if I log in as Chris, I'd see that acknowledgement in there. And once I approved it, it would then show up. So let me click on here. It's going to say demo. So now that's approved. What does that mean as far as Ted is concerned? You may remember that I said he could see it was shared with him when it was done. So when he goes down to his documents, come on, my mouse is a little fidgety right there. Now, where it shows up here, I do have a little bit of time, so this is where I'm glad I have some time. I'm going to show you how this works, where it shows up. In my situation, here it is. There's my handbook acknowledgement right there, and I can click on it, and there's that one there. I could save a copy as the employee. I could save a PDF of this. So here's that one that just got approved. The other one may not have an approval process. I don't remember. All right, so he can see those. Now, why did it go in this default one? Because I set that as my default folder. So let's go quickly, last couple of minutes here. Let me talk a little bit about how that works with document types as well as document location types. So these folders that you see here, as well as, let me jump over to the employees that you see in self-service or in HR here, doesn't matter, I'll look at Chris. These right here are these document location types right here. So you'll see a few of those names match up to what you're seeing here: personal, confidential, affirmative action, and you'll see those in here: affirmative action, personal, etc. So those are the forms or the folders that you see over there on the left-hand side. So that's where they come from here. So you'll see defaults as an example is right here. Now you can choose which folder is your default. You may not have a folder called default. I happen to have one. So I'm going to go ahead and make that one my default one. Let's talk about this. So the code could be whatever you like to call it. The name is what you're going to see over here or in self-service. So you may want to, call this default documents or something like that. Of course, you could put it in multiple languages. Default share, what that means is when you upload files to that folder, do you share them by default? So if I drag and drop files into this folder called default, do I want it shared with the employee by default, or do I need to go in and edit this so they can see it? So you'll see how it says shared yes. If this says false here, then it's gonna not, when I drag and drop, it will not share it by default. All right, now you can go into the document types and you can actually set the default or the folder location for different documents. So you'll see here, it says document location code. That is this code right here. So if I made one called acknowledgements or something, maybe confidential as an example, I could say, all right, I'm going to take that code there. And then any of these documents, if I want it to be like a confidential document and go into that folder by default, I could do that. So perhaps I go to this policy acknowledgement and I say the default location is this confidential file. That means from this time forward, as soon as I hit save, from this time forward, any form that's confidential file, or sorry, policy acknowledgement is going to go to the confidential file folder by default. So it's going to go there. Now I can move it, but that's where it's going to go by default because I selected this. So it allows you to kind of tie a form directly to a folder using this document type. So I know I covered a lot here. We will be sending out a recording of this. So hopefully if you didn't catch it all in your notes or, as I was going quickly there, you can come back and revisit this. Of course, our support is here to help you. Reach out to us by, you can see there's a little help right here. Of course, this talks about how it works here, but here you can see help at Criterion HCM. There's our number. If you are working with a partner, you can obviously reach out to them as well. They should be able to help you out with this information. Hopefully our Q&A questions were answered, but if you had any, or you have any right now, please feel free to put them in. Let me just switch back. We're going to talk about what's coming up next in our Criterion learning series here. So I'm going to share my slideshow. So as you can see here, in a couple of weeks, we're going to switch over to payroll. I guess I have this on here twice. I thought I had updated this. GL account mapping overview, what we're going to cover. And then we're going to talk about, I thought we were and I could have sworn I updated this here, deductions overview. So a couple of payroll topics that we're going to cover. And let me just verify my calendar here, because like I mentioned, I thought I had updated this on the 28th. We are talking about those, and then we're going to talk about learning management overview. And I could have sworn there was something else there, and I'm a little frustrated because it's not updated correctly in here, and I thought I did
Steve,
that.
I can do the
go
update.
ahead.
So on Tuesday, March 28th, we have deductions overview. On Tuesday, April 11th, we have the learning management overview. On Tuesday, April 25th, we have performance management overview. On Tuesday, May 9th, recruiting open positions. And then on Tuesday, May 23rd, employee self-service train the trainer.
Performance management is one I forgot on there. Thank you so much for that.
No problem.
All right, so thank you so much for that on there, and thank you for joining us today on our thing. Let me just share that again where I've updated this. So you can see that. As always, as I mentioned, you can always reach out to support if you have any questions on this. We're happy to answer it. But thank you for joining us today. If you haven't seen these